So the fourth and penultimate season of Stranger Things, which is one of my favorite shows of the past decade and honestly of all time, it just wrapped up on Netflix a few days ago. So today I, the film watcher, shall be ranking all four seasons of Stranger Things from my least favorite to my favorite. Now, when talking about this show, every season is at least really, really good, even if there are some problems in the mix. But so it was somewhat difficult for me to rank them, but it was also kind of easy because I do have very set opinions on this show. And that sentence may age poorly if I rewatch these seasons and my thoughts completely change. So I guess they're not as set in opinions, but you know what? I've watched each of these seasons many times, aside from season 4. So yeah, I didn't rewatch the show before season 4 came out, even though I would have liked to. But I did remember quite a bit. So with that said, let's get started. In last place, unfortunately, is Stranger Things 2, the second season of the show. Okay, now this season has a lot of really good stuff in it, but it just has some problems that hold it back. And let's start talking about some characters, because Mike for this entire season is just kind of moody, and until the final few episodes where he's kind of back in leader mode. So he gets better in this season, but Mike just never got ever back to where he was in season 1, because he was such a great character in the first season, and in season 2 he's just kind of ugh, come on guys, what are we doing here? Ugh. And it was okay, get on with this. I can't take a full season of Mike like this. And it wasn't a full season. It was just most of the 7/9 of the season. So yeah, Mike, he just kind of has gotten worse ever since the show began. Or at least ever since season 1 ended. Will he has a bigger role, but he's, again, used as very little more than just a plot device. And he gives a great performance. Noah Shab is a very good actor, and he's very good in the role. But that's he doesn't really get a ton to do outside of being possessed. And then I gotta talk about Nancy, because she was good in the first season, but she's just kind of been up and down. In this season, she's pretty unlikable. It makes Steve, who is a pretty good guy at this point in the show, but he's still not at his peak. It makes Steve seem like a very responsible and reasonable person, which is not something that Steve should seem like. So it's when Nancy is going out and getting drunk, it's just okay, I don't want to see this, because I don't really like Nancy a whole lot, but she's been kind of up and down. And then her relationship with Jonathan, we'll talk about that in a bit when we get to season 3. And then you have Eleven's little one-off side plot, which is just weird. I mean, maybe it's even more weird now, because they have never referenced those characters or Eleven's entire journey in this season since then. We're now in season 4, about to enter season 5. Maybe 8 will come back, but they've done nothing with her. She was mentioned in season 4, I think. What are we doing? And then the episode itself, it's not bad. On its own, it's actually pretty fun. It's a solid journey for Eleven, who's a character that I really like. And the characters that she encounters, they're fine. I like her relationship with 8. I like that we get to see some new powers. But, it's a weirdly placed episode, because it's 11 finishes up her visions of her mom, and then she's gone for the next episode, and then this episode happens. And it's okay, it's in between when the Demodogs get loose in Hawkins' lab and when the Demodogs attack Hawkins' lab. So it's sandwiched between these two great episodes that should come one right after the other, but it's not, because it's interrupted by this little one-off. And I think this episode would have been better if it had been if it had taken the place of current episode 8, and been episode 8. You know, in between when 11 comes back in all her punk gear, and then you do this episode, so we get a little background on that, and then go to the finale. It still wouldn't be a great episode, but I feel like it would flow better. That said, even though this season does have some pretty significant issues that a lot of which revolve around that one episode, it's still a very good season. I really like all the new additions, like Max and Billy, just two very compelling new characters. Bob, justice for Bob. I love Bob. He's such a delightful character. He's goofy, he's fun, and Sean Astin does such an amazing job playing him. You got Murray, who is doesn't have a huge role in this season, but he's really funny when he does. And then you get to the Hawkins Lab side of things. I think Owens is an interesting new villain because he's not really a villain. He's just kind of trying to fix things, and he's not really doing a very good job of that. So he's nicer than Brenner, which is a kind of interesting change. And then you get some characters who get some very good development. Steve, specifically. In season 1, he was kind of just the typical jerk, and like the intention was for him to just be the typical jerk, but Joe Keery just being too likable, man. So he gets some great development. Hopper, 11, they both have great development this season, and even Dustin, like he gets some cool stuff to do with D'Artagnan the Demodog. Speaking of which, the Demodogs as well as the Mind Flayer introduced, like expanding the world of the Upside Down. That was a cool idea. Actually, I got the Mind Flayer drawing that Will does up here. I think I drew that myself. Yeah, and very cool supernatural threat. So it's a good season. I just kind of wish it was a little bit more focused. At number 3 is going to be season 3, and this was just a very, very good season. It's a lot of fun. It kind of leans into a bit of the blockbustery vibe, and I don't mind that. Like, I like that this is just a rewatchable, fun season that has like pretty high stakes when you really get down to it, but it's just a very good season. There are some issues here. I think Nancy and Jonathan are just a terrible couple. Like, they have very little chemistry. To the point where in season 4, they interact one time, and that's the only time that I didn't like either of their characters in season 4. I really liked them in season 4, but then they got back together, and I was like, this again. And they're together a lot in this season, and I like them both marginally less when they're with one another. I just don't care about them when they're a couple at all. They're fine when they're just like a partners in crime, but when they're actually like boyfriend and girlfriend, it's just okay. I don't care. And then Mike this season is just a moron. It's a funny moron. Like, if Finn Wolfhard has done a very good job at playing the character across the 4 seasons, even if the character himself has had some kind of iffy writing. I don't know, just not as good as he was in season 1, man. Speaking of bad writing, not really bad writing, just not good writing, Karen Wheeler. Now, Karen Wheeler, the mom of Mike and Nancy, yeah. Now, in this season, I never got why she was a main cast member, because she doesn't do anything that, like, any of the other parents don't already do. I mean, in season 1 she kind of does. She's actually a pretty good mom in that season. Season 2 doesn't really do anything, but she's still okay. Whereas this season, she's just flat out a really badly written character. Oh man, like, Digi and the other moms are looking at Billy, and it's like, okay, that's weird because he's a teenager. And then she, like, dresses up to go out on a date with him. And, like, dude, that's, like, for one, teenager. For 2, she's married. It just makes her seem super unlikable. So it's like, that's where Karen Wheeler just hit the bottom for me. I don't like her at all. And as they learn their lesson in season 4, because she's not even in the main cast anymore. which that's good. I could always use less of Karen Wheeler. And then the season does reuse the Mind Flayer, though it does it in a unique and interesting way, so I don't mind that as much. That said, despite its kind of small character issues, the nitpicks that I just gave, it's a really good season. Like, for every Nancy and Jonathan you get, who are just... you get a Joyce and Hopper, who are just such a refreshing, fun relationship who bounce really well off of each other, and it's clear that they have, like, significant feelings for one another. That's more developed in season 4, and, like, it's just a really, really charming relationship, and you get a lot of those good relationships in this season. Like, the original party, you have Mike, Will, Lucas, and Dustin, and they're all, when they're together, they're great. You get Steve pairing up with Robin, who's a great new addition, as well as Erica, who's also she wasn't introduced in this season, but she's a very good addition to the main cast nonetheless. I really like Robin in this season. She has a really nice rapport with Steve. I like that they don't get together because Robin is lesbian, so she wouldn't. But yeah, it's just a very charming relationship that they have, much better than Nancy and Jonathan. I'm gonna stop complaining about Nancy and Jonathan. I've done it enough. Anyway, so another aspect of this season that was really good was Billy. He was just a pretty big step up in terms of development from season 2, because in season 2 he was just kind of flirting with people all the time, being just a jerk who got taken out in a very satisfying way in season 2 when he was drugged, I think. Yeah. But season 3, he gets much more development, where you dive into his backstory, his past, with, like, his mom and his dad being the worst person alive. So it's just... And Dacre Montgomery does an amazing job at playing him in this season in particular. And then, of course, you do have the Mind Flayer, who it was kind of recycled from season 2, but it's done in a much different, much cooler, and much more gross way, where it's like people just kind of explode and the juice just kind of squelches and becomes part of the Mind Flayer as a whole. It's kind of disgusting, but I kind of love it. And the final battle that they have with the Mind Flayer is really, really cool. The entire finale is just incredibly emotional. And I've heard some people complain about, like, the Russians being introduced. And when I first watched this season and saw that the first scene was in Russia, I was like, wait, what? Why are there Russians here now? But I didn't mind them. They were kind of just evil for the sake of being evil. There wasn't a ton of depth there. But, I mean, you get Russian Terminator, so that was cool. And they do complicate things a little bit, and as if this show needed to get more complicated, but they do add a nice little combat element there. So it's a very, very strong season, if it has a few issues here and there. Number 2 is going to be Stranger Things 4, the latest season to come out. I don't know why they split this up into 2 volumes, because despite the final 2 episodes taking me 4 hours to watch, it was still only 2 episodes, which was weird. Let's get that out of the way. This season in general was really, really great for the most part. Some issues, I'll talk about that in the mix here. I liked that this season kind of expanded the scope. I mean, it had a lot of characters, and there was a lot of stuff going on. So the first time I watched it was a bit difficult to follow, but once I rewatched it the second time in preparation for Volume 2, it kind of sunk in a little bit better. So I was able to follow everything that was going on, and like, you get a ton of different plot lines going on in this season, and it's all like, I kind of like that this show has gotten on this size and this scale in comparison to Game of Thrones. That is valid, although it's a tad less graphic than Game of Thrones, and hopefully it ends much better. Anyway, and then you get the longer runtimes, which, okay, the finale being 2 hours and 30 minutes, that was a bit much, but they put in, like, a lot of really, really good stuff in the, I don't know how long this season was, and as a whole, it was probably like 12 hours, maybe. That was more than that. I don't know. it's a very long season, and even though it's only 9 episodes, but it's a really, really good season. It's not afraid to go very dark. I love that it embraced more of the horror elements of the show, especially in the first few episodes there, and I'll talk about Vecna in a bit. I like that it combines some of the threats from the first 2 seasons with, like, the Demogorgon and the Demodogs in Russia, or Brenner and Owens, and Brenner being alive. I don't know if I fully buy that, because, I mean, he was pounced on by a Demogorgon, and he just has a scar on his face to show for it, but, okay, I don't know, maybe, but, yeah, I like that. And then you get some new threats, like the Lieutenant Colonel guy, who I enjoyed, he was not likable, but he was a good, solid antagonist. And then there's Jason and the basketball dudes. I'm kind of mixed on these guys, because, like, in season 1, I found them kind of compelling, and, like, okay, this guy's gonna probably get taken down a peg. It's weird that he has as much influence over the town as he does. Then in Volume 2, he just dies. And it's a cool death, but it's like, okay, you could have redeemed him or something. But nope, they don't really do that. And I don't really buy the whole leap from where he is at the end of Volume 1 to where he is in Volume 2. But you know what? It's cool. And then the main thread of this season is my personal favorite antagonist in all of Stranger Things, and that is Vecna. Holy crap! Vecna is an awesome villain. He has just these ruthless powers that create some really, really raw, horror-based sequences that are just kind of disturbing to watch. He looks really cool. The makeup and CGI is ridiculously impressive. The budget for this season was $270 million per episode. They put that budget to good use, man. The CGI in this season as a whole is very impressive. And then the voice by the actor, who I won't get to later, is very, very cool. Like, it's done in a way where it doesn't sound like the actor unless you, like, really, really listen. Like, at first when Vecna showed up, or at least in episode 4 when Billy turned into Vecna at one point, where it was Billy and then it was Vecna, I thought that Vecna was Billy, because he kind of sounds like him, but the actual twist was much better than whatever crap I came up with. It was, like, the last 20 minutes of the end of Volume 1 had me like, wait, what? Because you get, like, it's not just one twist, it's 3 twists in the span of, like, 20 minutes, and it's all awesome. Like, you get this nice, orderly dude he's nice, he's helpful, he's not helping Eleven, and he's being kind of just a cool guy. And then you find out, like, you get this scene where he just puts his hand out, and people are thrown against walls, and it's like, wait, what? And then he rolls it up his sleeves, and it says 1, and I'm like, oh, man. And then you get to his whole monologue thing, where he reveals that not only is he 1, he's Henry Krill. And it was like, what? The son of Victor Krill, who was blamed for killing his family, and actually it was him. And then you get to the end of that scene, and it was like, wait, he's also Vecna? I'm losing my mind here. Anyway, Jamie Campbell Bower did a remarkable job at playing every single aspect of the character. He is awesome. Like, he's properly kind of comforting, even if there seems like something off about him. He's being the nice, orderly dude. And then when you get into Vecna, it's like the amount of makeup that is on him. It's actually makeup. It's not all CGI. Like, there's some CGI. I read something that said it's 90% makeup on him. That is impressive, that he's able to act through, like, the huge amounts of makeup that's on him. So that's a lot of talk about Vecna that I've done, but he's just a great villain. We also get some new additions here. Eddie Munson, who seems to be a fan favorite, and I see why. He's a great addition. The actor does a phenomenal job, and his death is just, it's heartbreaking, and it's really, he just goes out in such an Eddie way, man. And then you get Argyle, who, I mean, he didn't have, like, a huge character arc or anything like Eddie or even Vecna, but he was just a fun addition. I like that Jonathan has a friend that's just his, even though, he smokes weed with him, but okay. That was a bit strange, but who cares? And then you get Dmitry Antonov, who was the guard pal of Hopper's, and he was played by Jaqen H'ghar from Game of Thrones. And I really liked this character. I think he had a nice bond with Hopper, and just a cool new character. And then, like, this season was split up into several different plot lines. The Jonathan, Mike, Will storyline, and Argyle as well. It had some really good character stuff, especially with Will and his potential infatuation with Mike that Mike is just oblivious to, and like that's what they alluded to. So that's what I think it is. But especially that speech that he gives in Volume 2, that was just that was heartbreaking, man. And Noah Schnapp did a great job acting-wise this season. Like, Will got a lot more to do. He wasn't just a plot device, but anyway, it was some very cool stuff with Will. The plot line itself kind of just meandered around, going to places, bopping around, going to Susie's house of lunatics, and then until the final 2 episodes where it did pick back up and tie into everything else, but it just kind of felt a little bit odd. 11's plotline, at the beginning, she was there with Mike and Will and them, and it was pretty easy to be sympathetic to the stuff she was going through. But then the middle of the season, she just kind of sat in a tank having flashbacks, and even the nature of the flashbacks is very confusing at first, because it's like, did she actually experience this? Did she forget about this? And it was like, oh, she didn't remember any of this. Okay, so that was a bit weird, even though that plotline has an awesome payoff with the Vecna reveal. And then you get the Russia plotline, which is pretty intense, and you get Joyce and Murray off doing their thing with this dude Yuri, who's just not likable. Kind of fun, but I don't know. And then Hopper is just in such a dark place after actually pretty funny in season 3, but he's just all broken down inside. He's just like, and he thinks that he is the curse. He has his whole monologue in Volume 1 that's just great. And that plotline has some awesome payoff with like the invasion of the Dema folks, Gorgon and dogs, respectively. I don't know. And then you get the Hawkins plotline, which is a classic Stranger Things with the mystery, the running around, the not talking to the police for whatever reason, because even though they're not competent, the new chief seems kind of competent, I guess. I don't know, who knows. And then in this plotline, the Hawkins plotline, you get some great development from Max as well as Lucas, but specifically Max. Like, she has like skyrocketed in my top 5 in this list here, in my list of Stranger Things characters. And then the finale really pulls everything together. It's 2.5 hours. It kind of earns those 2.5 hours. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that it just ties in really well. It makes everything work, like, parallel to each other. All the plot lines kind of just working in symbiotically. I think, yeah. And it just did a great job at bringing everything together, even though everything was very spread out in terms of geography. And the cliffhanger at the end of the season, it was, man... It sets up like a crazy and epic final season, so I cannot wait to see what they come up with in season 5. And overall, this season was just awesome. But at number 1 in first place, and unless season 5 is really awesome, I don't know if they're ever going to top this, it is season 1. And it's just such a special season of television, because it's like, it's very much like a lot of stuff that has been done before. It takes a lot of inspiration from 80s films, Stephen King, your Steven Spielberg stuff, and it's reminiscent of those things, but it also uses those things to create something wholly original. It's a great, like, 80s throwback show. I mean, I wasn't around in the 80s, so what do I know, but it's still, like, there's a lot of references in there, probably some that I'm not even picking up on, and it's a show that does a really great job of balancing the horror and the kind of sci-fi espionage sort of elements with, like, the dramatic moments with the characters, the adults, the teens, the younger kids, who are just all great characters. And yeah, the season has just some amazing characters. And even the characters that I don't really like in the later seasons are really good here. Nancy, who's she's not the best, but she's a compelling character. And like Jonathan as well, and even those two together, I don't like them at all as a couple, but they're good as friends and do possible romantic feelings for each other in this season. Even Karen Wheeler, like she's actually a pretty good mom in this season. She actually does care where her kids are. She's not just like, who knows where they are? It's summer. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that about season 3. But anyway, and in terms of the characters, I'm just gonna dive into a few of them here. You got like the adults are all very grounded and realistic. Like Joyce, easily at her best in this season. Winona Ryder gives such a raw performance as Joyce in this season, and she is phenomenal. And like you can see her just doing whatever she can to get Will back, and she doesn't care if everybody thinks she's crazy. She's just doing it because in her mind, that's like the only thing that she has to do right now, and it's just such a compelling arc for her character that I don't think any of the later seasons have really topped that. Like 2 seasons in a row, seasons 3 and 4. I just did 1 and 2. She finds a small thing that's slightly off, magnets falling off her fridge, a doll being cracked, that make her just go off on this wild adventure. She's right every time. But in this season, she feels like just a very grounded, realistic type of person. And she's just very passionate about getting Will back, and she's trying everything. That's a lot to talk about Joyce. Anyway. And then you got Hopper, who starts out a very cynical man, who's just kind of sunk into like alcoholism, but through helping Joyce and helping the kids and helping to find Will, he's really changed by the events of this season. He gets a great development across this season as well as for the rest of the series, and he's always been affected by the events of this season. And you get the teens in there, like I talked about Nancy, Jonathan. They're likable characters, and they are at their best in this season. Like, even Steve, who's technically probably at his worst in this season, because he just gets great development going forward, but he's still a really fun character. Like, he's not unlikable, because Joe Keery has just such a great screen presence. He's so good in this role, man. This was great casting here. And then you got the tweens, who this show was able to, right out of the gate, perfectly capture the awkwardness of them interacting, as well as like the humor in there. Like, I feel like this specific group, this is how me and my friends would have talked like when we were like these kids' age, 12, 13, whatever age they are. They don't really specify. But like, it's just such a great cast of characters. Mike, Dustin, Lucas, even Will, the very little we see of Will in this season. And all of them are so much fun because they're great together. They have amazing chemistry, and they have for the entire series. And then you get Eleven, who's just a really fascinating character, played really well by Millie Bobby Brown. She does a ton of acting by not really acting that much, and she does a fantastic job in this season. And she kind of throws a wrench in a bit of the tweens' actions, their plans to find Will. But, I mean, she does it for good reason. She's not antagonistic to them, but she actually fits in very well with that group. And in my opinion, Mike and Eleven have the best chemistry in this season. Like, later seasons, they have good chemistry. They're very good together. They've never, like, gotten to this point, as far as I'm concerned. And then you get Dr. Brenner in there as a villain. He's just, you don't know a lot about him, but at the same time, it's like you don't really want to. You just kind of like, the implications of his actions are kind of scarier than finding out what his actions are. And speaking of it, Matthew Modine does a very good job. And then you get like the main antagonistic force in the Demogorgon, kind of getting a little bit of the Upside Down. They go in there at one point and it just seems like a parallel universe. It hasn't been fully fleshed out yet, of course, but flesh is Upside Down. Yeah. And the Demogorgon is just a very cool antagonist. It's just, it's kind of just a monster that eats people, but it's so great at doing that. And I really appreciate, like, the simplicity of this season, how it's not spanning different continents, different states, and stuff like that. It's just, it has stakes that are relatively low, especially when compared to the other seasons, but they feel high because you really care about the characters and their plights and what's going on here. And it all ties together really well. Like, they all come together even though they don't know each other all that well. I mean, some of them do, but some of them are just meeting, but they're working together, and it really works. And, like, I really like that this show uses a lot of practical effects in this first season, whereas there are parts of season 4 where it's like, okay, it's a bit much on the CGI, guys. Where, like, Vecna's hurling through the Upside Down, and it's like, okay, to ease up a little bit. I know you have a $270 million per episode budget, but ease it off a little bit. But this season, the Demogorgon, aside from the scene where he's on fire, I'm pretty sure it's all just a dude in a suit, and he's just does such a great job at doing that. Mark Steger, the actor, I believe his name is, and it's a really cool looking creature. So it's just a great season, and it opened the gate, if you will, to a fantastic series that, despite some issues and never really quite reaching the highs of this first season, still does a very good job at pretty much everything that it attempts. It's a great show. I love it. So, that's it. Thanks for watching. Comment your own rankings of the seasons of Stranger Things down below. I will see y'all next time, and keep calm and watch Stranger Things.